Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this webinar. My name is Victoria, and I will be your moderator for the event. At the top of your screen, you will find a Q&A button. Please type your questions in the box, and we will answer them at the end of the presentation during the Q&A session, time permitting. Any questions that do not get answered today will be answered by email. The webinar will be recorded, and all attendees will be emailed a copy of the slide deck and the recording. Today we'll be talking about the user experience and how to eliminate the negative experiences caused by security solutions. So for a little bit about us at SECUDE. SECUDE is a global provider of data protection solutions for SAP customers. We are the original developers of SAP Single Sign-On and now focus on data-centric security and classification solutions for SAP. Now I will turn it over to our main presenter, Aparna Ju, our Technical Product Manager.
Thanks, Victoria. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, and I hope everybody's doing great. Once again, I'm Aparna Ju, and I am responsible in the capacity of a product manager for the scope and direction of SECUDE's latest release, HaloCore, which is a full-scale auditing, classification, loss prevention, and protection solution specific to SAP data. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about that later in the capacity of user experience. But to know more about the solution, please do visit us at secude.com or contact us. We'll be more than happy to help you out. So I'm glad you could join me today to hear me discuss two, I believe, powerful topics that, when merged, is a big part of good security solutions design. And those are the underdog user experience and, of course, security itself. Now, eliminating negative impacts that users face when using a security solution is quite a challenging, but I think it's a pretty lofty goal, and it's not an easy task, but the industry is definitely making some strides towards it. Now, it's something, when done right, is not only going to benefit the end user, kind of keeps them happy and keeps them doing the right thing, but in turn, it benefits the enterprise that the end user is working for. So it's all about achieving the right balance. And what I'm going to do is take you through a brief educational journey into user experience in general and bring it back to security solutions, and then have some suggestions and insights on how you could possibly shape an enterprise's user experience / security landscape. So what is user experience, and why this big buzzworthy noise around it in the past year or so? Well, honestly, it took our industry quite a while and to fully understand how important user experience is to everything that we build, not only in a product sense, but also in solutions, softwares, most of our things that we use in life. And it came about when we could actually tangibly measure the relationship between a good user experience, or UX in short, and a successful company. So, for example, successful websites that bring in a lot of revenue for a company or bring in, expand the bottom line. Well, once that relationship was kind of noticed and been able to be measured, a lot of companies started taking a look at how user experience could help them as well. So now there's all sorts of explosion in the user experience field. There's a huge section on user experience skills. There are product groups, focus sessions, VOC, VOS, UX-specific designers, and they're all at high demand. So at the heart of it, user experience really is about effectively addressing the needs and circumstances of your users and producing an interface that they can interact with that's not only comfortable and effective to use, but also maybe even happy. You really don't want them to be unhappy in using an interface. Now, if that wasn't enough to keep you guys happy of using an interface, think about this. Your needs are constantly changing. So what you guys expected in terms of an interface maybe a year ago, maybe even 6 months ago, it's completely different today, and then I guarantee that a year from now, what you demand is going to be different from today's products. And on top of that, technologies are constantly evolving as well. So there adds a whole different level of challenge to this whole UX puzzle. So let me take you back in time a little bit to 1988 and introduce Donald Norman. So if you guys haven't heard of him, he's actually largely credited to be the father of UX. If you have some industrial designers or more of a true user experience designer out there, you've definitely heard of Donald Norman. But back in '88, he wrote a book that was aptly titled The Design of Everyday Things. And interestingly enough, he originally called it The Psychology of Everyday Things. And I see it really as being interchangeable because ultimately it is the psychology of the user that drives how we should design the product to fit them and make it a good user experience for them. So in that book, Norman goes into the theory of how people behave when working with everyday objects. And he also comes up with guidelines based on that psychology and based on those workings of how we as designers can use that to be able to develop something for them. There is a running theme throughout the book, though, that deals with blame, and this was a cool thing that I wanted to point out. But when I'm talking about blame, he specifically is talking about who is to blame when a user misuses or misunderstands or finds errors when using a certain product, whether it be an everyday product, whether it be a not-so-everyday product, it didn't matter. And the user who's using that product or device often blames themselves. So the psychology came in to say, well, most of the time if someone can't figure something out or they figure it's them, that the problem is them. And Donald Norman would argue that in most cases that's not true. The designer of that device or that product is to blame because ultimately they produced something that wasn't easy to understand or something that lets errors happen or misuse happen or misunderstanding happen. So remember that. Next time you guys have trouble using something, it's probably not you. Blame it on the designer. And I'm going to have to remember that the night before Christmas when I'm setting up intricate doll houses for my daughter, and I have no idea what I'm doing. It's definitely not me. That's the dumb one there. So one of the concepts I wanted to pull out, I'm not going to talk about everything in the book. I just wanted to pull out things that I think will apply to our situation today. But one of the concepts, a very simple concept, is called natural mapping. And as it sounds, natural mapping is nothing but the relationship between two things. So it's the relationship between, say, a control and the resulting function of that control. So the diagrams you see on your screen right now, on the left and right side, both the same, but it's a stovetop design, and then you can see the burners and you can see the controls of the burners. Now on the left-hand side, the mapping's not that great. You can figure out why. If you were trying to figure out which one of those burner controls actually turns on or turns off the burner, it will be hard without looking at the labels on the bottom. Now, a better design is by using our natural mapping ability to say, hey, why don't I spatially align these controls with how the burner's set up? By doing so, anybody can figure out that the top left burner goes to the top left control and vice versa, and so on and so forth. So that's just natural mapping in a nutshell. Another concept that I find very interesting is called perceived affordance. Now, all that really means is the actions that you perceive that you're able to do with a certain device or object. So, for example, how do I go about using this thing? Do I operate a lever by pulling it, pushing it? Do I twist it? Do I turn it? Those are perceived affordances. So, for example, if I give you a product, just a square with a big button on it, what would you do? You'd probably press it because in your head, your perceived affordance is if I see a button, I'm going to press it. So that's the sort of psychology we're taking out. Now, the best example of this, and this was actually one of the pet peeves of mine, that's why I put it up here, is doors. So nowadays, I think many UX door designers have figured out how to get around this issue, but doors only swing one way most of the time. And when they do, a lot of doors are actually the same on one side and the other. So how do you know if you're supposed to push it and pull it? Now, the reason it's a pet peeve of mine is because most of the time when I come across a door like that, I get it wrong. If I'm supposed to push it, it's supposed to be pulled, and vice versa. So that is actually a really bad fail when it comes to UX. It would be easier to look into a human's head to say, hey, if I put a push lever there, then the natural mapping and perceived affordance of that person is to push it, and then they will automatically push it. There's no stress involved. Same thing with a pull bar. If you put a pull bar, you do that too. Another great example is to just write it out. Say push or pull. Makes it less confusing. Or better yet, because the push and pull that doesn't aesthetically is not very pleasing. So it's just better to make it a part of the design itself. So what I'm showing you is that this is a two-way door. That's another design. If you really wanted to make both the sides look the same, then make it a two-way door. Then all you have to worry about is hitting the other person coming through one way. That could be an issue going forward, but that's a whole different use case. So now, granted, this book does focus more on the design of physical, everyday things like water faucets or doors or clocks and so on, because back in 1988, that was kind of the big thing. But these ideas are presented are directly applicable to how we are looking into software interfaces and websites and everything that includes in the IT space that we're a part of today. So how would you go about designing a better product today? Same concepts, different context. So the first thing you should really think about when you're designing something is what goes on in the head of the user when they first see your product. In the first moment, the user's probably going to form a conceptual model in their head of how this thing in front of them works, right? So how can you do with what you have in front of you? So it's the little things. Now, the reason I'm pulling it into what you see on the screen right now is app design is the hottest trend, hottest thing right now. So let's just take a couple of those concepts I spoke about and pull it into app design. Splash screens, we still have them, but they're becoming a thing of the past, but it's really annoying. I'm not sure how most of you enjoy sitting and staring at an advertisement. Sorry, Walgreens and PayPal, I didn't mean to do this. It just happened to be the one image I found. But just putting up these little advertisements of as a splash screen just so that you can hide the loading process. We're a lot smarter than that as users, so we know what's going on. I really don't want to see it. I want to get from point A to B as fast as possible. Or this was the other option, loading bars. So where you're staring at the loading circles around and around going nowhere until it happens or the app just kind of craps out, whichever way. But once again, this is just bad UX today because really your user doesn't want slow loading. They don't want diversions. They want to get from one point to the other in the fastest possible time. They don't want to waste their time. You don't want to bore your users, and you don't want to even force a good user experience. You kind of want to invite them into having a good user experience. So when you do take a look at some of the little things, it can make a really big difference. And I'm not sure how many of you have used Uber in the past. It's one of those on-demand taxi services that many cities are adopting right now. It was actually one of my colleagues that suggested it when I was traveling because I always just rent a car or go through the normal taxi line. I started using Uber on her suggestion, and I absolutely loved it, and that's why I'm bringing it up today, because their app and how they've designed their user experience is perfect because they took all those little things into context. First of all, they use my phone as a GPS, so they know exactly where I am. My credit card information is already stored in an account, so I don't have to carry cash. And also, I don't really have to wait that long because as soon as I say I want a taxi now, it figures out where I am. It tells me how far away the taxi is, shows me a picture of the driver's face, and the number of the car, so it's safe for me to use when I'm in a foreign city or something like that on my own. So I think they've taken a great effort into looking at the user experience and listening to their customers and seeing what's going to make the best sense. So once again, little things, big difference. So user experience in general comes down to changing assumptions. The research, the design, everything of products is really about changing what people think other people should assume or assume what other people should be doing. So do you know what the difference between the biggest and most profitable companies in the world are, apart from the ones that are in the same domain but not there yet? And as a hint, it's what we're talking about. It's user experience. So companies like Amazon, Google, Apple, those companies that are literally owning their space, they're focused on creating those products that deliver a world-class user experience to their customers. So if you're a competitor and you're trying to figure out a way to get into that same niche out of those guys up there, you'll need to figure out how to bring user experience into the mix to be able to do so. So I'm going to bring up Amazon just as an example. Now, they definitely revolutionized the whole online shopping experience for today's generation. And what I'm showing actually up here is one of their newer newer type of releases. It's called Stream, and it's meant for your mobile devices and iPads and tablets and so on, but it's basically, as it sounds, a stream of products that goes by, and then you can just browse through it and pick what you like and buy it. So I'm not trying to promote Stream, but what I'm trying to show you is that they constantly evolve themselves to the changing technological environment and the user's experience around them to stay successful. They want you to spend your money, and they want you to spend your money with them. Home networks, another great example. All the rage right now, you can't go into a Home Depot or a Lowe's or anywhere else, Best Buy even, without finding tons and tons of products specifically for home automation and home networks. So we're not only talking about security systems and fire alarms and medical alarm monitoring, which has been in place, but we're now talking about all our mobile devices being able to control everything from heating to the mood of the light to your blinds and shades in the morning or evening. They can turn on video cameras. Someone rings a doorbell and you're at work, you can see who's there. You can see when your kid comes back. You can get a text message to say someone's opened the door. I mean, there's just so much that can be done. In fact, we've evolved, or technology has evolved to keep up. For example, we've upped from 2.4 gigahertz to 5 gigahertz for less congestion. Your smart TVs stream all your PC content. So a good user experience is when you can use all this stuff well. Think about how terrible a bad user experience in this sort of a setting is. You can call the fire department in the middle of the night for no reason. Lights can turn on and off. I mean, things can go haywire. You can lock yourself out of your house. I mean, this could be a nightmare if it went wrong. So this is a great example of why user experience is so front and center in this particular arena, because it has to be. Wearables. Now, this comes down to how we perceive experiences in general. Wearables are changing everything. Whether you prefer not to take a look at your phones anymore and prefer to look at your wrist all the time and go with an Apple Watch or one of those, or whether you're into the fitness aspect of it and the health monitoring and the food monitoring, all that other stuff with the fitness the Fitbits and competing with your grandparents on who walks more, that sort of thing. This is changing the way we are looking at life. So it's going to be interesting to see how this pans out and what happens coming out of this whole wearable generation. This is a great slide. I love looking at it because in order to bring a new user experience, you obviously have to listen to your customer and kind of see how they naturally do things, like those concepts in Donald Norman's book. But for example, on the top left of your screen, how the customer explained it from a 3-step ladder to the bottom right where it's a tire swing that he actually really needed. Look at all the steps in the middle where it could go wrong. I really do love this slide. And this is what's going to happen when it goes wrong. You have bad user experience, bad designs, and terrible sales. Now, I know this is meant to be facetious, but it really is sad. I don't even know how this would have passed code, but this is terrible. So this is obviously a big fail. How about this in terms of figuring out how to pay your parking? Think about parking in a deck like this when you have a meeting to run to in 5 minutes. Fail. Registration forms, pet peeve of mine. I do a lot of online shopping because I don't have too much time to spend actually going to shop. And if someone has a bad registration form, that does it. They're done in my book. So I take a lot of interest in how people use their user experience in terms of registration forms. This one happens to be a donor information form. And now I know with donors, you apparently have to give a lot of information to be able to do this. But could there have been a better way? I think so. I'm sure you'd agree with me. And the icing on top is the fact that they have a reset button that if you unfortunately click, you're going to have the pleasure of being able to start all over again. So I was talking about shopping. What you see on your screen right now is a place I would never go to. So that's a fail. 3 out of 12 reasons why software fails are directly related to problems with UX. Now think about that. That's really high. So UX has kind of been a sleeping giant when you think about it. Not very many people care about how the user experiences things if they're trying to get their job done. Security happens to be one of those areas, because what does it matter to us as security professionals if we're protecting data? Tell the user to do it. That's That's what they got to do. That's pretty much what I hear in the industry. If that's the way they're supposed to handle security solutions, tell them to go through all the steps to be compliant. True, they have to, but is there a better way? Absolutely. There's always a better way, and that's what we're trying to achieve. And here are the reasons that 3 out of 12 softwares fail. The software is very complex. I like the old one better. Why do I get an error message? Why can't I copy-paste from my Excel sheet? How come the file isn't downloading? Gosh, this is taking too long. Why do I have to click so many times? Sound familiar? Yep, so this are the reasons why. So let's put it into security. I talked about the general UX and general design. So in terms of security, are usability and security competing goals? Absolutely, they are. Like I said, there is always ways to improve upon it. Humans are the weakest link in the security chain. Security systems are social as well as technical. Security mechanisms do require extra work, and humans will always find a shortcut and workaround if it's extra work that's burdensome. So there'll always be trade-offs between security, privacy, and convenience, and they are sometimes inevitable. And from the user's perspective, increases in security and privacy are frequently accompanied by reduction in convenience. So for example, if I told you, all right, Mr. So-and-so, you can now use this app. However, these are things you cannot do. In your mind, you've already lost your edge of convenience, and you would rather not use that app. So I'll give you an example. For turning off Microsoft's ActiveX controls or disallowing cookies. Does that improve your internet privacy? Yes. Does it improve your internet security? Yes. But how about your browsing experience in commercial transactions? It would impair that. But that's the dilemma we're facing. So do we allow users to be able to do what they need to do to make it convenient for them or for the security of the company? Once again, we're coming back to that balance. So the other thing is turning your browser security as high as possible. That would completely degrade the browsing experience, and most users will be dissatisfied. So in the other aspect, you really don't want your users to go the other route. If you tell them to do this and they go around you and say, well, I'm going to make sure that my security setting is the lowest possible so I can enjoy a convenient browsing experience, then you, within your enterprise, have now opened your company up to a potential of a data breach, and that's not good. So us as security professionals, instead of saying no, we have to work on a way of being able to accommodate while maintaining the authenticity of our security policies within our enterprise. It really is unrealistic if you reduce risk by limiting access to applications. So I'm going to give you an example of a certain company where someone needed to do something and they came up with a whole cloud-based system of sharing and collaborating because the project they were working on was multinational. The problem is the security professionals within the IT department said, no, sorry, that's not within policy. So there are two ways this can go. One, shadow IT, and they can do their own thing anyways because they need to get their job done, and to them, they don't care if their security is not in place. Or two, they don't use it, they stay compliant with the policy, but then they're not productive. Both situations are not great. So it's better we agree to kind of finding a compromise and a trade-off in how we do things. So what are the best ways to do it when it comes to your enterprise security in general? Taking the users out of it for the first aspect of it. There is not one solution that does it all. We haven't found one. If someone comes and tells you that I've got this great security solution that covers you for everything, please send me an email because I'd like to know about it as well. The best way to approach security is to layer it so you eliminate the number of gaps you can potentially have to lose data, which can then cause either malicious attacks or can cause breaches and your name in the news sort of thing. You don't want to go that route. So the best way to look at it is to do something in all three major layers of your enterprise security structure. The network, which is where your information travels, it's the highway. The storage, where the data comes to rest after it travels. And the file itself, the data itself. Now, once it's traveled and rested and all that stuff, the data itself, the heart of the matter itself is the file. So those are the three different layers. If you find a solution in each one and kind of stagger them around, that gives you the best chance of going about this. And there are trade-offs in terms of user experience to all these solutions in these different layers. However, that is the best approach, and there are ways to compromise with the user experience factor of it. So why are we doing this to begin with? It's a digital world. We all know right now the codependency with the success of your company relies on how much data you collect, analyze, and effectively put forward for the success of your company. And because of that, most of the data you produce is not really on a piece of paper locked in a cabinet. It really is digital. It's in your ERP systems, it's within your enterprise, it's within your clouds, it's your employees putting this stuff out into their laptops and devices and so on and so forth. So because of that, there's so much information traveling, resting, moving, collaborating upon that there is a need to try and protect at every possible point in your infrastructure. So in the network layer itself, there's VPNs, there's firewalls, and there's also DLPs, data loss prevention tools that you can use. So what are some problems with VPNs? I have to use a VPN because my company is in Europe, and a lot of our information is stored behind the VPN as well. Do I like that experience? Absolutely not. We've actually kind of worked around it and tried to find some other cloud-based solution that's going to give us a security, but also the fact that we don't have to go behind a VPN every single time I have to grab something. So as you can tell, people usually have issues with the whole VPN level. Firewall is an absolute necessity to ensure that no malicious attacks get through. DLP, that's another pretty common route out there. DLP solutions, do you need one in your network layer? It depends. It depends on what you guys are using. Can it do its job? The DLP actually has two different functionalities. It monitors and it also prevents. Now, the monitoring portion is quite effective, and we've heard positive reviews from many DLP users about the monitoring portion of it. The prevention portion can be iffy, and the reason is because it uses context/content analysis to be able to figure out its rule sets to prevent. Now, it uses more content. So what it can scan to be able to figure out what to prevent is not always the best possible case. I'll give you an example of that. If you're a financial guy trying to look into a sales report for end-of-the-year calculations, a DLP solution scans it, figures out the sales content, you're not allowed. But that is your job. So in order for you to get access to it, now you have to go through an admin and you have to jump through hoops to be able to do it. It kind of gets your experience, user experience, it becomes a big negative at that portion. So there are ways to work with DLP to try to eliminate that negative user experience, but it's there. And once again, with all these solutions, there are constant improvements to work on the whole user experience aspect of it. These storage levels. Now that the network is secure and your data can travel with limited chance for any sort of breaches, let's look at the storage level. You have a whole BYOD policy in place and a cloud in place. So storage now is not just some kind of local computer room sitting in an office building somewhere. It's everywhere that your enterprise is now kind of gone to. So storage level has a couple of different things you could look at. It's authentication and it's encryption. So on the encryption side, you could do something like full disk encryption, which basically in a power off situation renders the data on your device unreadable. So it's great for power off. Or TPM, Trusted Platform Module. What that does, it basically verifies that the hard disk drive is tied to that specific device, and it does this by using an embedded crypto processor that is attached to the device's motherboard. So if someone steals your hard disk drive at that point, it's going to be useless because it needs to figure out that it's basically what the device it matches up to be able to work. The other thing we could look at is the whole authentication aspect of it. That was the encryption. Now let's look at authentication. So you have the 4-digit PIN entry prompt for cell phones. You could look at different passwords, PINs, biometrics. Like now you can use your thumb to be able to log into your iPhone sort of thing. Key fobs, smart cards. all that stuff is important for the authentication or access to that particular device, your BYOD, in your BYOD policy. So that's storage. You want to be able to have authentication and encryption on that layer to ensure the least amount of data loss. Now let's come to the heart of the matter, which is the data level itself. Your data is secure traveling. It's now secure at rest if you've implemented everything correctly. But the most secure method of them all is to actually ensure this additional layer of protection on the file itself. So it doesn't matter at that point if there are compromises to your data in the storage or the traveling areas if it's protected at the heart using a great encryption method or some other kind of a data layer protection. The two ones I've pulled out here are encryption-based. One is PGP, which most of you probably heard of. It's called Pretty Good Privacy, and it's kind of an older technology. And then there's also rights management. IRMs, Microsoft's rights management is one of the best ones out there on the market. So with PGP, yes, you can encrypt a file and send it out to your intended recipient, but the problem arises is once they unlock it using the key, that information is now kind of open and they can send it on elsewhere and it's not protected. IRM is more configurable, so you can select a number of recipients and choose the length of time the file needs to be protected. You can even get alerts as to when that file has been opened. I mean, there's lots of stuff that you can do with IRM to ensure that your information is handled the way you want it to be handled, whether you want the recipients only to be able to view it, whether they can copy it, whether they can print it, edit, all those can be set up via policies in IRM. So that's a great advantage to using data layer protection as well. So once you've got all that in place, how can you help the user experience aspect when it comes to security? So once again, you don't want to say no. You want to be able to help the users understand the importance of your security policy, because most of the time they're just trying to do their jobs. And if you're going to add on a bunch of policies that hinder them, they're going to look at it as a pain. I mean, there's only a certain tolerance to pain that they can potentially take. So a couple of different things you could do on the IT end is create different user types. A lot of companies that we have looked at with our products, a lot of users don't really necessarily look for the highly sensitive information to do their jobs. A lot of times, like 80% of the time, people are pulling out information that can be protected on a base level. It doesn't have to have the highest potential protection. So in that case, don't make them jump through hoops to get basic information. Create different user types. Channel application flows. Make it easy to access information only if necessary. And then once again, just help users understand that your employees are your best assets along with your data. So you want to keep them happy and productive. And the best way to do that is to train them and help them understand the potential consequences of the actions and make sure that they understand that you're helping work with them instead of saying no to making sure their jobs are easier. So I'm going to pull it back from security solutions and become a little more general because a SECUDE Halo Core is SAP oriented, as I spoke about earlier. So we've got all the stuff I talked about with all the different security technologies, right? Network, storage, and file. And that's great. We're looking at your whole enterprise. It's now well protected. Now when you have all this information, a lot of it is going to reside inside your ERP system. And SAP is one of the more prolific ERP systems out there in the market. So SAP contains a lot of information that's very, very important. And if any of that information tends to get breached on its way to getting collaborated on or on its way to get shared out of the system, you have a potential problem. So now your information is protected inside SAP because SAP does a good job with roles and authorizations and SODs and password hashes and all the good SAP type of security in place. And your enterprise is already protected using all the different technologies I talked about. But there is a gap. There is a bridge. There's a white space between SAP and the enterprise. And that's where we have looked into fitting in. So if, for those not familiar with SAP, the information in there is prolific. It's a ton of stuff, financial. Some of the stuff that we at SECUDE have found that customers are really interested in protecting have to do with PII, which is in your HR information, and a lot of intellectual property items, which are in PLMs and BOMs and your engineering documents. And of course, finance is always important. So those are some of the key areas. Now, there are lots of areas in SAP that have information, but those are the most common ones that we see customers coming to us asking for protection on. And as we live in an economically flat world where we collaborate globally and we share and we work with applications that are cloud-based and so on and so forth, things come out of SAP all the time. And they need to do your job. You can't have everything just sitting in SAP. They need to be coming out. They're collected there, but they're not necessarily utilized there. And here's that white space I talked about. The traditional solutions, unfortunately, aren't connected into SAP. So they're both on two different islands, if you may. One in your enterprise, one inside SAP. And this is where we've conveniently come to pass, where we fit in to try and work in a way with your current security solutions to be cohesive. We can stand alone if you don't have downstream solutions, which ultimately is an enterprise situation we don't recommend. You should have everything in place. Or we can work with other downstream solutions to make your whole enterprise security pretty much tight in terms of preventing data loss and eventually preventing breaches. So how do we do that? I'm not going to go into the architecture of what we do with the solution. I'm going to keep it very much the user experience aspect of it. So if you say, hey, I'm going to add another whole level of security to SAP, what about my user experience at that point? Well, yes, that's a very valid point, and that's a great question. So what we try to do when we design this product is to make sure that we limit any sort of user interaction as much as possible. So what I'm showing you here right on the screen is our UI inside of SAP. So that's a report that displays a BOM, a bill of materials for a certain product at a company. So the user over here has went and tried to download this information, and this is what our classification UI looks at. So what our classification UI does, or classification functionality of HaloCore does, is if you have a classification schema already in place, we'll extend that into SAP. So for example, over here, this company has secret, confidential, internal use, and public. So we have already taken a look at the context of this data that the user wants to export, and we have figured out that this is secret information coming from manufacturing. So all the user has to do in this aspect is to do one click and say confirm. If they don't agree with us, they can change the selection. We will definitely log that the user changed the selection, this is what they selected, or they can save it unclassified and justify why they did that. So there are a couple of options here. Now, we've also had companies come to us and say, we don't want the user to see anything. We can do that as well. So in that way, when they're exporting something, we apply these classification tags to the metadata of this information that they are downloading or exporting out of SAP, and they won't even know. We'll go ahead and tag it for them. Same thing with the blocking capability of HaloCore. So what I mean by blocking is if there are certain transactions or certain reports, certain information inside SAP that you do not need to ever see, that ever needs to get exported. And in this example, it looks like it's password hashes. There really is not any need for a user to ever download password hashes. So in a case like that, we provide an easy way to go into using a body, to go into programming within ABAP, a very easy method of being able to block that information from ever getting downloaded. So as soon as the user pulls up that transaction, they can see that information, but when they go to try and export it, they will get a UI that sees, that looks just like what you see on your screen, and it says the download of this table was blocked by your administrator. Now that is also configurable. You can put whatever you want depending on who's configuring it, but that's another way of showing you the easy way we try to make the user's life a little easier and just say, go ahead and contact your admin on this one, or this cannot be viewed because of so-and-so reason or so-and-so compliance or something like that. Protection. So we bring in Microsoft's rights management solutions into SAP, and we do that in a very easy and beautiful manner by using a UI that's very, very easy to use for a user. So for example, this is a commercial balance sheet. This is something that the user is trying to export. Now, because it's not blocked, they're allowed to export this per your policy, per this company's policy in this picture. However, what we've done is we're applying a policy that says finance read only to this particular information. This is data level protection. This is going to encrypt this particular balance sheet with a policy for finance read only. And the way it does it is in the background. So for the user, all they're going to see once again is the highlighted, we think this is finance read only. All they have to do is click save and they're done. There's really one click to be able to protect this information here. Once again, this is configurable, meaning if you do not want the user to see this at all and you want all the information coming from finance to always be encrypted with a certain policy, it can be set up that way as well. And to make it easier for compliance reasons, we audit every single activity. So the blocking, the protection, the classification, if someone does not classify, why they didn't classify, if someone doesn't protect, why they didn't protect, where is this information going, what's the IP address, is it a Mac or is it a PC, what's the transaction code, who's the user, what application component did this come from. We audit and log everything, and these logs can be fed to BO so that you can visualize them. They could be fed into GRC if you're using SAP's GRC so that you can trigger some alerts within access control. So we can do some cool stuff with this auditing log. I'm going to show you a quick demo of our classification, our protection real quick. They're very quick. So over here, this is all SAP standard. We're looking up a financial statement. And we're going to run a report that will show you pretty much the financial information. Once again, standard SAP. This is a commercial balance sheet. So we're going to go ahead and try to export it in Excel. Right-click, save it to the desktop. There's the UI. Shows up, it's already selected at finance. All the user does is click save. This opens up, the file opens up on their desktop with the finance policy, and everything's good. Showing you a next transaction. This is actually a table. So they're using SE16 to look up USR02, and I believe these are once again password hashes. This time they're trying to download it again in terms of a spreadsheet. Put it on their desktop. All this is standard SAP, and we pop up again, and here the user chooses to save unprotected. We come in again and say, enter the justification. Why are you saving unprotected? Another thing we can do here is make this standard. So if you want to actually have justification drop-down boxes to say this does not need to be protected or this is confidential only, we can actually do that as well. So they're able to download this unprotected into their desktop. Now, if we go into that auditing log that I showed you in the last slide, you can see the first two transactions, the SE16, and you can also see the second transaction. You can see I need to leak all password hashes to our competitors, a little bit of security humor there, and the very next transaction as well. So everything's logged. So that's it for user experience. I hope you guys had some good information from what we've talked about today. If you have any questions about what we talked about or the products, I'm going to hand it over to Victoria right now. We've got a time for a couple of them, and then I can always email, answer whatever else is, that you guys might have later on.
Thank you, Aparna. The Q&A session is now open, so please send any questions you have through the Q&A box at the top of your screen, and we will answer as many as we have time for. So Aparna, looks like we have two questions right now about HaloCore.
Okay, sure.
The first one is, does HaloCore need to be installed on every client machine, and what would the installation time be for that?
Oh, okay, That's a pretty good one. Yeah. So actually, that goes right into user experience. So that's a great one. No, Halo Core in general, as I showed you right now, with both auditing, blocking, classification, and protection, does not need to be on every single client machine. It is the architecture is pretty simple. It actually is an add-on, and it goes onto the application server. Every instance of SAP that you need to protect, Halo Core gets put into that. And then we have a server that is kind of our brains, coordinating either the protection policies with RMS or the classification. The server is just nothing but a Windows server, and the files get passed between the add-on and the server. So no, we don't have to do that. Now when we go into the future and we're looking at protecting BEX, which is Business Excel for SAP, then at that point, yes, we're going to need to put it on every client machine. But if you don't use BEX and you don't use the BEX analyzer in any capacity, then no, we won't have to do that. Oh, and for the installation time, that also depends on how large the deployment is. But because it's the add-on and the server, the installation times are actually really minimal. We've been able to install it for a single instance within half a day. I hope that answers. I can always additionally answer personally via email if they come back and let me know what their situation's like.
Okay, sounds good. Another question we have: how does Halo Core work with other solutions? For example, a DLP solution.
Okay, yeah, great question. So yeah, so I talked about the different layers again with the network storage and the file. Halo Core would fall under that file-based protection method. And what we would do is when we protect something and classify something within Halo Core, the classification portion of it actually adds tags, metadata tags to the XML stream or into the file properties of that particular file that's getting exported. And when it does that, most DLP solutions can then be configured to read those tags. So you export a file, it's got this information written in the tags, it's basically labeled, if you may, and the DLP solution can then read that label, and the downstream solution can then do the same thing and then do whatever you set up the downstream solution to do. Whether if something's tagged confidential, it goes into a confidential Dropbox, or whatever you guys are going to do in your enterprise, we try to fit in with it. So if you have a specific DLP provider, we're working on vetting our product with a lot of DLP vendors to make sure that it's as widely acceptable as possible. But the way we tag our information, it's very global, meaning that a lot of different DLP vendors can read our stuff. But we work with you on an individual basis. If you say, hey, I'm using this particular DLP vendor, we'll go with them and test it out as an integration point and then make sure that it works for your environment.
Okay, thanks, Aparna. So it looks like we're short on time, and that's all the time we have for questions. If we didn't get to your question, look out for an answer in your email. And with that, we will conclude our presentation for this afternoon. Thank you all for attending, and remember, you will soon be receiving a copy of the slides and the recording of the presentation. Thanks again, and goodbye.